Hello, welcome to chapter 10 of the Pain Habit Book Club. My name is Drew Coverdale, and in this chapter we'll look at the story we tell ourselves about the pain. The words and meaning we give the story can shape our experience about pain, and sometimes that story can keep the pain alive. So chapter 10, what's your story? So what was the trigger for you, and what was your entry point to persistent pain? Was it the event that ever since it happened you've always been in pain? A moment of physical trauma where you sustained an injury that is still painful now, months or years later? Car crash, an accident at work, that day in the garden when you lifted something too heavy, that slip, trip or break? Or was it gradual? It started for no obvious reason, so you had to look for one to make some sense of it, as there had been no obvious trauma for that pain. You may have thought it was down to your age, wear and tear, posture, weight, the way you've used your body, genetics, or due to the diagnosis you've been given. Your pain was perhaps intermittent at first, then increased in frequency and intensity, and has been a constant pain in your life. If your pain started with a physical injury, whatever injury you sustained, that tissue healed within 3 months. All tissue does. You now know that pain never relates to the amount of tissue damage sustained or the amount of change found during investigations. Many people have had the same injury as you and recovered. Many people have the same diagnosis but have no pain. If your pain came on gradually, there was no physical trauma to cause any damage. How does that make any sense to you? To believe that your persistent pain is due to some form of damage? You might describe a tiny event. I just bent over to pick up my sock. I woke with a pain in my neck. I turned suddenly and felt a pop. Even if you recall that event correctly, it is impossible to create physical trauma from those things. If we asked 100 people to do exactly the same small thing that you recall as the cause of your pain, who would suffer physical trauma from that? Why would it happen only that time when you've done that so many times before? The human body is incredibly resilient and can withstand much more than you realize. If you believe pain can only be from physical trauma or a medical problem, you only look for evidence supporting that belief when searching for information to understand why your pain has started. You may now have a lot of proof to support that belief. The actual physical damage you sustained at the time, what you were told about it and by who. The pain you experience now is real, so how could it have been anything other than a physical origin that has left you with lasting damage, causing you pain to this day? You may have scan results, x-rays, and other investigations proving you have damage inside of you. You'll also have information and diagnosis about that damage given to you by very trustworthy, intelligent, authoritative, well-trained medical practitioners. Many of their treatments will have failed. You may have already known about that kind of injury or diagnosis given to you and had beliefs about what that meant. Arthritis, disc degeneration, spondylosis, tendinitis, repetitive strain, and many other common medical terms are incorrectly given as a reason for persistent pain. You may have known others amongst your family and friends to have had the same problem. You recall how they responded, moved, and behaved with that condition. Or you might have never heard these terms until you were given them as a diagnosis. You may not have understood them fully at the time and feared them. You may still fear those medical terms now. Over time, you may have learned much more about it. You may even now consider yourself an expert on your condition. You know the name of it. You possibly have a visual representation of it in your mind. You can describe what's happened to you when asked by others. Occasionally, patients are left bewildered when nothing is found on examination to give them or their medical practitioners any explanation for the pain. Unfortunately for these patients, they are often told the pain is in their head or given a label to live with. They are left with a belief that there is something medical wrong, but the doctors haven't been able to help. However, your pain is explained to you. However, your pain is explained to you, you feel destined to keep it. And I told you have to manage it or learn how to live with it. You know the things you can and can't do, and you have to get used to it. The belief you hold now, however you recall it starting, is that your pain is due only to ongoing physical damage, a diagnosed medical condition. If nothing was ever found during the investigation, a condition has yet to be diagnosed. If you did have physical trauma originally, it was right to hold that belief about damage for a short period to protect that injured area whilst it healed. If there wasn't any physical trauma and you have pain years later, that belief never had a place in this scenario. Yet it is now that belief which underpins your persistent pain. If you've continued to believe you are physically damaged since then, that belief becomes the filter for how you respond to anything your brain sees as a threat to that damaged body part. You had thoughts, responses, movements, and behaviors originally because of the pain, and you still have them. You move in a certain way to protect yourself. You anticipate when the pain is coming. You carry on with some tasks because you feel they have to be done despite your pain. Sometimes the pain is so bad that you have to stop because of it. Your strategies for dealing with pain are based on what you observed and learned in childhood. That could be to fight pain and not stop or slow down when you should. You could feel like a victim of it and give in to it before you need to. Because you've only ever seen pain as due to a physical cause or a medical problem, your strategies are misguided. That means your pain presents an ongoing situation with the three important components that cause stress: uncertainty, lack of information, and loss of control. You're uncertain about whether it will get worse or how it may affect you in the future. You have a lack of information about how to resolve it, and you're not in control of it. That leads to additional stress on top of the original stressful situation that triggered your pain. You don't have certainty or the right information, so the only other thing you can attempt is to get some control. Whatever you use to get that sense of control has only a temporary, short-lived effect. Only when there is certainty, the correct information, and control for any situation does the stress from it subside. That means you have to keep repeating the soothing behavior you use to get the temporary feeling of control. Our desire to get control through that behavior is futile. All three factors, certainty, information, and control, are required in full to resolve the stress about any situation in all of us. One of the three is never enough. Your stress coping strategy may originally be effective in making you feel alive and better about yourself. The pleasure centers of your brain are unconsciously rewarded, and over time your strategy becomes less effective. Your brain gets less reward from that activity, so you need to do more of it to get the same result. Your brain craves that chemical so much that changes happen in the brain to the point where you eventually feel unconsciously compelled to do your coping behavior. They now get very little reward from it, but this process leads to addiction. It happens in a part of the brain that many don't even know exists. This is why we all have difficulty changing our behaviors, and this comes from attempting that change through the willpower of our conscious minds. It is so weak when you consider the relative size and processing power of our unconscious mind, where that habit now sits. Unfortunately, the result of pushing hard physically and psychologically as a coping strategy to deal with the stress of your pain is that you run a never-ending cycle of stress and pain. The negative emotions continue due to your inability to beat it or find a diagnosis from it. They are compounded by your frustration at not being able to do the things you want to do in life anymore. All these things add stress to your life. So if your pain was never related to the damage you believed originally and was only a response to the level of cortisol and adrenaline in your system, those negative emotions you continue to feel drive the cycle onwards. At some level, you have an emotion attached to your persistent pain, a feeling that was present at the time it originally started. If you closed your eyes for a few minutes and asked yourself what the strongest emotion is that you feel as you focus on your pain, it will come to you. There is a strong link between pain and emotions. Whenever you feel the emotion or one like it, it has the possibility to trigger your pain. This could be from any situation in your life, whether real or imagined. Repeatedly feeling all those negative emotions quickly takes your stress hormones to the point of overload where they become toxic to you. Just like it measures the water in your body and warns you with a feeling to take conscious action on what it has detected, just like it detects the nutrition in your body and warns you to take action when it gets too low, just like it warns you with physical stimulus from receptors in your body when it detects something threatening. As long as you acknowledge and respond to the warnings from all these systems quickly enough, you'll not feel pain or sustain damage. The risk of damage increases from these systems until the pain is at such a level of alert that damage is highly likely if you don't respond soon. There are only so many warnings each system has. If we leave our moment of response to the moment we experience pain, we have to quickly recognize which category of alarm that pain relates to in order to react correctly. It's pretty obvious that persistent pain is not due to thirst or hunger, which only leaves physical or psychological trauma or overload. Any physical overload or trauma repairs in all of us within a few months. Scars or findings of that damage are found in people who are totally pain-free, so that only leaves the category of stress and the ongoing drivers of it as the recurrent trigger of your persistent pain. You have a conscious choice of when to act on any alarm signal from your brain relating to your systems regulating water, nutrition, your physical condition, or psychological threats. If you ignore or misunderstand that signal and do not take the appropriate action, the unconscious brain takes over to enforce protection. At that moment, it delivers pain so intensely, with such frequency and power that your conscious intention to do something can no longer override it. Your focus is suddenly placed on pain so severe that from your conscious viewpoint, it came without warning or reason. It's because you ignored or genuinely didn't see those warnings that the pain comes as such a shock to you. You look for the reason it arrived so suddenly and is affecting you so badly. You desperately search for the meaning of that pain. You look for the physical place where you feel it, and so does everybody else. You become stressed because that level of pain stops you from doing the behaviors that you've always done to deal with stress in your life. Negative emotions are increased due to how you feel now about your additional physical problem. Rather than recognizing this pain relating to the stress you feel, you attribute it to a physical cause. This creates another reason to feel stressed. What if your pain is not related to the amount of physical damage sustained? Could the pain be from your response to it? What if your circumstances meant there was no injury? Could the gradual discomfort that became your persistent pain be related to the level of stress you were under at that moment in your life? What if you and many others misinterpreted your pain? What if understanding the true mechanism behind your pain means you can do something else about it rather than accepting you have to live with it? The sustained level of emotions at the point you first felt that pain became the catalyst, forming the habits you present with now. They affect your life in a way that you like to change. It is emotions that form habits and not repetition alone. It is emotions and habits. Sorry, I'm reading the same line. It's emotions that form habits and not repetition alone. If certain behaviors are adopted at a time of high emotional intensity, those behaviors quickly become automatic in the brain. This happens especially if there are no alternate positive thoughts or emotions to prevent that negative pain habit forming. You've experienced thousands of pains which you remember unconsciously in your mind, which don't trouble you today, but your persistent pain has become strongly associated and wired together with those emotions. Those small changes in your emotions affect that pain, and small movements of that part of your body affect your emotions. We know scientifically that The emotional regions of the brain are seen to be involved much more with persistent pain than with acute pain. With persistent pain, you haven't been responsible for paying attention to your role in that regulatory mechanism. Your system takes control and prevents you from doing the behaviours identified as a potential threat. Trouble is, because you feel driven to find some ease from the stress of your situation, you unconsciously rely on the earliest mechanism you've learned to deal with that stress. You don't realise that pushing yourself hard is your strategy, and you feel compelled to do things the way you've always done them. It's a downward spiral of pain, stress, negative emotions, and more pain. You eventually become exasperated with the pain. You can't figure out why it's happened to you, why the pain never leaves, or why it comes and goes with the pattern it does. Accepting the belief that it's due to the damage that you must now live with is common. It affects your life so badly that you may have had to give up doing many things you loved. Even though you physically or psychologically do much less than before, you may feel puzzled why the pain remains the same despite your changes. The easiest perception is to believe that your damage is so bad that now even little physical movements cause pain. On the days the intensity rises and falls with no physical trigger, you don't make the connection that it is your thoughts and emotions influencing it. In reality, those movements, thoughts, and emotions cause that pain because your unconscious system has become so protective of you going back to that time and level of physical and psychological overload. As soon as it recognizes any trigger for either, the pain you feel can stop you in your tracks. Understanding why this has happened to you, your entry point to it, and the mechanisms that brought you here shine a light on the pathway and steps you can take to create new habits to form your pain-free life. Thank you for joining me for chapter 10. If there's any reflections you have, then share them in the comments about the story you have about the pain. You'll find a link to the Pain Habit book in the description. And don't forget to subscribe to follow on with any other chapters.